everybody. My name is Brandon Holt, and I'm going to be your instructor through the next few weeks of lessons on this series, Basic Piano Techniques. I'm so excited that you chose to go with this series, and I pray that it's going to be a blessing to your life. I've been playing the piano now since roughly about the age of 14. I learned in about 3 months one summer before my 9th grade year of high school, and I started out with a C chord, and from there just taught myself how to play chord charts. And then through the last roughly 15 years, I have been learning different techniques and different theory practices that I have put into play in my playing that I believe is going to help you learn quickly and make you a better pianist and keyboardist. So I really appreciate you taking the time. The cool thing about these lessons are they're going to be available to you online, and you can use them at any time. So let me give you just a little bit of instruction on how to use these. It is one video, and what you need to do, in the comments section here, or in the about section, I have split up everything into the timing where each lesson is. So really wherever you're at, look and find out what each lesson's going over, and then kind of find out where you need to start, and you can just go to that point. And then remember which lessons you've been through throughout the week as you begin to practice. So here's the key. I'm going to give you the knowledge, but you have to put in the time to practice. And that's really going to be the element. I remember when I was beginning to play, I would walk about 1.5 miles from my house to the small church my dad was pastoring in a little Georgia town called Jessup. And I would spend 6 and 7 hours a day up there in a hot 100-year-old church building with no air conditioner. And I would sit at that keyboard and I would just play and play and play. Now maybe you're not a 14-year-old boy at summer with no responsibilities and you can't spend 6 or 7 hours. But whatever time you can spend every day is going to be imperative to see you grow. And that will depend on the pace that you're able to go through these videos and learn. So if you will spend roughly 20 to 30 minutes a day going over these lessons, practicing till you get them right, till you get them good, till you get all these things fluent, within 3 months, I believe that you're going to be playing, reading chord charts, knowing every major, minor, diminished, augmented, suspended, second, seventh, major seventh, and 9th chord in every key that there is. And you're going to be able to read a chord chart and play and do whatever you want. You can look up tabs, you can look up chord charts to your favorite songs, whatever it is, you're going to be able to play them. And more than likely, you're going to be able to hear something and be able to play it too, just depending on what kind of ear you got. All right, so I'm excited for you. I'm ready to get started. So if you're ready, let's go on and move to lesson 1. Welcome to lesson 1. This lesson is going to be very basic, and if you're not a beginner and already have this knowledge, you can go on and skip to lesson 2, whatever you'd like to do, lesson 3, wherever you're going to feel comfortable. Remember, you can always look down in the about box and find out where you should go. All right, but lesson 1 is going to be very simple. I emailed you a chart that has all the names of the keys, and I want to go over that and teach you the names of these keys and how I remember them and basic ways that you can learn them and memorize them, because this is going to be very important. We have to start at the foundation, the very beginning of this entire process, so that you know the names of all the keys. That way when we start building chords, you're going to know the names. When we're doing scales, you're going to have to know the names. So it's kind of like math. You got to learn to add and subtract, divide and multiply before you can move on into deeper things and more advanced things such as algebra, trig, and geometry and things like that. Music's the same way. It's all built off the basic building blocks, and that's what we're going to learn right now. So I want you to come and take a look at the keyboard right here. All right, guys, so as you can see, we have a variety of number of keys here, and we're going to start right here in the center of the whole keyboard, and this note right here is known as middle C. Okay, so middle C is important because it's in the middle of the whole keyboard. Everything lower than middle C is going to be lower tones. Everything higher than middle C is going to be higher tones. Okay, so This is where you're moving up and down the keys, but we're going to start right here on C. Now, if you'll notice another thing, we have different groupings of black keys. So you have a grouping of 2 and you have a grouping of 3. All right? Over here you have another grouping of 3 and a grouping of 2. Up here you got a grouping of 2. This keeps alternating all the way through the keyboard. Okay? So starting with middle C, you can always tell a C by its position to the black keys. In fact, you're going to know all the notes to their position to the black keys. So with C, C is always going to be on the left outside of the 2 black keys. So when you see 2 black keys and you look at the note that's on the left side, that's always going to be a C. So if this is a C, where would another C be? Well, right up here. 2 black keys, that's the C too. Now listen to the tone. That's a little lower, and because we're moving to the right of middle C, we're going higher. So we're going to get the same note, but a different higher pitch. That's called an octave right there. Now if we move down, we're going to go lower, but we're looking for a C. So 2 black keys, there's 3, there's 2, there's a C. All right? All of those are C's, depending, their tone variation depending on where you're at on the keyboard, okay? So, now, moving on. You see the 2 black keys, there's a key in the middle. This is D. Now, it progresses alphabetically, all right? So, from C, we move up to D, okay? Now, I always remember D when I was starting to play because it was in the center of the 2 black keys, and I was taught that it was in the dog house, all right? So, D's in the center, it's in the dog house, D for dog, D is in the center of the 2 black keys. So you have C on the left side, you have D in the center. Where would another D be? Well, let's find it. 2 black keys, D, D, 2 black keys, D. Very simple, all right? Next, you have, progressively again, E, okay? Now, E is always going to be on the right side of the 2 black keys. So 2 black keys, E. 2 black keys, E. 2 black keys, E. All right? That's all the way through the entire keyboard, no matter how big your keyboard is. It's always going to be C's on the outside, D's in the middle, E is on the right side. Okay? Left, middle, right. C, D, E. Very simple. Now, let's move to the other 4 white keys, all right, that are surrounding the 3 black keys, okay? And we'll get to learn these names in just a few minutes, all right? Now, on the very outside edge of the 3 black keys, touching the first black key, is going to be F. Now, look at this. You got C, D, E, and then right beside that, on the outside of the 3 black keys, is F. So it is progressing. You always can know F because it's on the left side of the 3 black keys. So that's an F, there's the 3, that's an F, there's the 3, that's an F, even 3 more over here, and you got a lower F, okay? And remember, if it goes lower on this side of middle C, it's going to be lower. If it goes on this side of middle C, it's going to be higher because that's how the keyboard's progressing in its tones. Now, next to F, all right, right on the right side, or on the left side of the middle black key is going to be what? So if this is F, this is going to be G, okay? So you can always tell G because it's on the left side of the middle black key, all right? Left side of the middle black key, and it's right next to F. So it's always going to be F, then G, all right? So that's your first key right there in the middle of the 3 black keys, G. So here's 3 black keys, there's F, there's G. Here's 3 black keys, F, G. These are things you want to memorize. You want to be able to look at these and know every number or every letter that's represented here and what the names of each of these keys are. Now, normally, all right, now if you're a child or if you're younger, okay, kids usually think that the next one is going to be H. But right here is where we switch and we go back to the beginning of the alphabet. So this isn't H. There is no note known as H. There is A through G. Those are the letters that are associated with the alphabet, A through G. So, if we have C, D, E, F on the outside, G on the outside of the middle, then we've reached G. Now, where do we got to go back to? A. That's right. So, A is on the right side of the middle black key. So, every time you look at the three black keys, you see the middle one, and you go to the right side of it that's touching it, that's going to be your A. All right, so we got F on the very outside. We got G that's in the center on the left side of the middle black key. Then we go to A. So it's always going to be F, G, A. Okay? And then to finish out the white keys, we're going to start going back through the alphabet. Okay? And you've got the three black keys. And on the very outside of the third black key is B, because it always comes after A. All right, which leads back into, look at the 2, what is this? C. So you got A in the middle on the right side of the middle black key. You've got B on the outside of the three black keys, the right side, and then you start back over with C. So let's go all the way through from here to here and name these out. C, D in the doghouse, E on the outside of the 2, F on the left side of the 3, G on the left side of the middle, A, we start over, remember, so it's from G to A on the right side of the middle, B on the right side of the outside of the three black keys, and back to C. It's that simple. Okay? Now, you really want to practice learning these. If you don't know all the names of these keys, you need to pause the video now so that you can start learning that. Even take a day or so, or however you want to do it, whatever pace you want to set, and really practice learning these. But to learn the black keys, there's one factor we've got to learn, and that is this. There is two techniques in piano playing or in music called sharping and flatting. All right, so you can sharp a note or you can flat a note. Now, if we're on C, okay, and I told you moving up and moving down. You move down, you get lower tones. You move up, you get higher tones. To move up or to the right is to sharp a note, okay? So to sharp a note is when you move up or to the right, okay? To flat a note is when you move down. All right? So to sharp a note, you need to move up. To flat a note, you have to move down the keyboard. Does everybody understand? So to sharp something, you're going to move right. To flat something, you're going to move down left. All right? So, starting with C, if we want to find the name of this black key, it's going to have two names because it has two keys beside it. Do you see that? C and D. It's in the middle of C and D. All right? So, if I'm going to name this key, I can name it C sharp because I took it up half a step. So to sharp something, you take it up half a step, and we'll learn about that in a minute. So you either got C sharp because I took it up. Do you see how that worked? So related to C, this goes up. So it's C sharp, or you can call it, now related to D, looking down, you can call it D flat. So the name of this key is C sharp or D flat, okay? So it has two names depending on whether you're going up or whether you're going down, all right? So if you're wanting to flat it, you go from D and it's named D flat. If you want to sharp it, you go from C and it's known as C sharp, all right? So this is C sharp or D flat. Next, you have this note, okay? So coming from D, if we want to know the sharp name of that, you got to look where it's coming from. So you start at D, you move up. This is known as D sharp. Or if you're wanting to know the flat name of this note, you got to look from E, that's directly touching it, and this is known as E flat because you flatted the E. So this is D sharp, boom, or E flat. So you've got C sharp or D flat, you've got D sharp or E flat, directly responding to where its position is to the note that you're looking from. So if you're moving up to sharp it, you're going to call it whatever it is, whatever note it is that you're moving up from. So C sharp or D sharp. Okay? If you're going to flat it, you got to look from the note that you're moving from. E flat, D flat. Okay? Go back over that if you need to understand flats and sharps again. Okay? Let's move on to these three. It's very simple. The rule applies again. If we want to know the sharp name, we have to start here. This is F sharp. Okay, do you see how it's coming from F and you've sharped it up? All right, so to sharp something means you move it up. All right, or if we want to know the flat name, we got to come above it and we have to move down. So it's G flat. So the name of this first black key in the three black keys is F sharp or G flat. Okay, so let's review. You have C sharp or D flat. You have D sharp or E flat, and now you have F sharp or G flat. Let's move on to the middle of the three black keys. If we want to know the sharp name, where are we going to go? That's right, down here to G. So you have G sharp. So this is known as G sharp, F sharp, G sharp. Now, if we want to know the flat name of this, we need to come from above it, which is A. See how A is directly above this note? It's right there above it. A flat. Why? Because you're moving down. So it's A flat. So again, review. C sharp, D flat, D sharp, E flat, F sharp, G flat, G sharp, A flat, and finally we have our last black note, and that is A sharp or B flat. Okay? A sharp, B flat. So now we have all the names of these keys, and you understand how to sharp or flat something. To sharp it means you move up, to flat it means you move down. And the names of these five notes right here are directly based on their position to the note you're looking from. So if you're wanting to flat it, it's going to be moving down. If you want to sharp it, you're going to be looking from moving up. Again, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and D flat, E flat, G flat, A flat, B flat. So, you have learned all the names of every key. And don't forget, those principles that I just taught you are applied to every note on the keyboard. So if it's a D sharp in the bottom of the keyboard, it's a D sharp in the top part of the keyboard. All right? So practice this. You might want to take a few days. You might want to take a week, however long you feel before you move on, because you really need to know these. Test yourself. Hit a note and say G, B, A flat, G sharp, and really test yourself to know that you know that you know and have memorized all these notes so that you know where they are in correspondence to the keyboard, okay? Through the whole keyboard. Even have somebody test you on that, all right? So I will see you in lesson 2. We're going to be learning some awesome stuff, and I'm excited to share it with you. Hey guys, welcome to lesson 2 of basic piano techniques. If you're coming from lesson 1, then you've already learned and memorized all the names of every note on the keyboard, which is way simpler than it sounds, okay? Now in lesson 2, we're going to start by teaching you a basic principle that you will be using the rest of your time in music, and it is understanding half steps and whole steps. For that to be understood is going to give you an ability to be able to build chord structures and scales. So it is in everything. You've got to know half step and whole steps for all of music, because it's a basic principle that you use all the time. So I want to briefly explain to you what a half step is and what a whole step is, and then we're going to get into building scales during this lesson. All right, so you were progressing awesomely. All right, first off, a half step is when you move from one note to the other without skipping any notes, and I'll show you that in just a minute. A whole step is when you move from one note to the other by skipping one note in between. So let me show you what that looks like. Okay guys, now let's apply our knowledge that we just learned about half steps and whole steps onto the keyboard. It's very simple. If I want to move in half steps, it means I'm not going to be skipping any notes at all. So I'll move from note to note up or down the keyboard. So it would be like this. Now that's also known as moving chromatically, which means I'm playing every note. Okay? Now that's a chromatic scale, and that chromatic scale never ends. It can go on as long as your notes can range, okay? But if I'm wanting to move from a whole step, I would have to put 2 half steps or skip one note. So a whole step is 2 half steps or skipping a note. So if I'm on C and I want to move a whole step, okay, I got to go 1, 2, okay, or skip that and hit that. So from here to here is a whole step. From here to here is a half step. All right, now from D, if I wanted to move a whole step, where would I move to? That's right, E. Now look, I'm at D, half step, which is a whole step from D. All right, now if I'm at E and I want to move a whole step, where would I move? Would it be here? No, look at this. There's no middle key or black key there. So guess what? From here to here is a half step. So it's not always just moving white keys that makes it a whole step. It's moving 2 half steps. So if I'm here, half step, which is a whole step, okay? Half step, which is a whole, okay? And see how I'm skipping a note to get to there. Now let's go back to C and look. Now let's say I want to move down a whole step. What would my note be? Would it be the B? No, again, it's the same thing. Here and here, there's no black keys in between. So from C to B is a half step, from E to F is a half step. Now what would be a whole step down from C? Half step, B flat. See how it skips a note. All right? So let's test you. In your mind, or say it out loud, whatever you want to do. What would this correlation be? Whole step or half step? Starting with G, and I move up to A. Is that a whole step or a half step? That's a whole step. If you got that right, very good. If not, watch and see again, okay? Let's try it again. Let's say, let's take it a little harder. Let's say I'm at E flat, and I want to move a whole step. Where would I move? F. See how I skipped? Half. F. Let's say I'm on F sharp and I want to move a half step up. Where do I want to go? G. Correct. Let's say I'm on B flat and I want to move a whole step down. What note would I play? Half. Whole. A flat. Very good. Why don't you take some time and memorize this and make sure you have this down before we move to the next part of the lesson. Now, the second part of lesson 2 is scale structure. And the important thing to remember about scale structure is it's the same in every key. So once you learn the scale formula and memorize it, by knowing your whole steps and half steps, you can start at a point and build every scale. Now the scale formula that's on some of the sheet work that I sent you through email is very simple. And it goes like this. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's the major scale formula for every key, no matter where you're starting. Again, That's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Okay, you need to write that down, memorize it, get that in your mind. Now I want to take that and now I want to show you what that looks like on the piano. Now, to apply the scale formula is very simple. All we need to do is find our root note or our starting point and then begin to apply the steps. So if I start on C, then C will be my beginning point or my root note, and it will also be the name of the scale, the C major scale. So whatever note you start on becomes your scale name and the starting point for your scale. And then you add the correct degrees. So if I'm on C, let's take this through. Remember, the scale formula is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Those are steps. So I need 2 whole steps and a half step. So here we go, starting on C. Whole step, D, another whole step, E, then a half step, F. Now the next part of the formula is whole, 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 half. So 3 whole steps in a row. So a whole step from F, G, another whole step, A, another whole step, B, and then we have to end it with a half step, which would take us right back to C, our root note. So again, that scale is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. You can pause it right now and fill that scale in on your scale worksheet or look at it right now to memorize that. Very simple. Remember, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Here's what the scale sounds like without any noise. Now, on your worksheet, why don't you pause the video right now and use the scale formula to fill in the rest of your scales. Start with D, go to E, then to F, then to G, A, and B, and once you get those written out, you can go to the sharps and flats. D sharp, or C sharp, D flat, D sharp, E flat, F sharp, G flat, G sharp, A sharp, or B flat. And just put a dot on the note. So if you were to fill out C, you'd put a dot on C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So start with D, do D major, and then move on up. And then you can come back and I'll play all the scales out and you can check your progress. Awesome. Let's check and see how you did. Here's the D scale, starting on D. Again. Did you get all those right, or do you need to make corrections? Feel free to pause at any time. Moving on. Here's the E scale. One more time. Moving on. Here's F. Again. Here's G. Again. Here's the A scale. One more time. Here's the B scale. Again. Here's D flat or C sharp. Again. Here's E flat or D sharp. Again. Here's F sharp or G flat. Again. Here's G sharp or A flat. Again. And finally, here's A sharp or B flat. Last time. So that's the notes to every major scale on the keyboard. You've now gone through chromatically and learned exactly what notes are going to be found in all the scales. So now make sure, you can go back and rewind, pause, do whatever you need to do, but make sure you have all the notes written right on your worksheets. That way, in the next lesson, when I teach you how to play those scales, you know that you're playing the correct notes with the correct fingerings, okay? So like I said, the cool thing about these lessons is you can stop and pause, go back, do whatever you want. Keep replaying this lesson until you feel comfortable with it, and then you can move on to lesson 3. I'll see you in that lesson. Hey guys, welcome to lesson 3. So glad you've made it this far. I hope that you've learned a lot, or even if you're starting here, I hope that you're ready to learn more. In our previous lessons, we've learned things such as all the names of the notes on the keyboard or on the piano. We've also learned what a flat and a sharp is. We've learned how to use whole step and half step intervals. And we've learned the scale formula of ho, ho, half, ho, 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 half. We also applied that to every scale on the keyboard. So up until this point, you should know all the notes in every scale on the keyboard. Isn't that awesome? Now we're going to take that and I'm going to teach you how to play those scales. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time on. So get ready to do some practice because you're going to need it. Very simply, you want to take your hand, and I'm going to show you this from the above view in just a moment, but your right hand, you're going to name each of your fingers a number. Your thumb's 1, your forefingers 2, your middle finger is 3, your ring finger is 4, and your pinky's 5. Those are going to play important roles in how you play the scales. And I'm going to give you a number pattern for each scale. It's super simple, okay? So here you go if you want to write it down. For C, D, E, G, A, B, D flat, E flat, F sharp, A flat, and B flat. Basically every other scale except F, your number pattern is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So you might want to write that down. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up on the screen just in case you need a moment. Now, let me show you how we're going to apply that to each of these scales. Okay, so remember, our thumb is 1, first finger 2, third finger 3, ring finger 4, pinky 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, remember I told you the scale pattern for the scale is going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's how it works. I place my hands on the piano, and my thumb's going to play C. 1. D's 2. E's going to be 3. Then I got to bring my thumb, sweep it under my hand to hit F. Okay, now watch that move again. Okay. Now why don't you practice that? Because that sweep is important. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you go back down. And you sweep over and let the third finger hit the 3 here on the E. Okay? So let's do that again. Then you have to sweep your thumb over to F, finish it out, then walk it back down. Sweep over, 3, 2, 1. Now watch me play that again. That's how we want to be able to play that scale. That's the C scale. One more time. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then walk it down. 3, 2, 1. And that's your scale. Practice C, and then let's move on to D. Okay, here's the D scale. Remember, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more time. All right, now you practice D and make sure you can get it that fluid. Here's the E scale. Again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more time. That's the E scale. Make sure you're doing it as smooth and as fluid as I am. If you're not, feel free to pause and practice, even if you have to practice a couple days. Here's the F scale. Now remember, F is the only one that's different. Its numbering system actually goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Watch how that's done. Now, I'm still sweeping my thumb, but I'm sweeping after the fourth finger all the way over to the C. So it's a big sweep. That'll take practice. If you lift your hand and your wrist, it makes it a little bit easier. Okay? So again, here's the F scale. Now look as I come back down. 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? That's F. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Moving on to G. G goes back to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very simple. Again, here's G. Here's A. Here's A again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down. Here's B. One more time. Here's D flat. Again, D flat. Same pattern. Here's E flat. Now this is tough because you're having to move through the black keys, but keep your wrist up and your hand up and it'll make it a lot easier for the sweep. See? You can catch that. Okay? E flat again. Here's F sharp or G flat. Again. Here's G sharp or A flat. Again. Now sometimes these are hard for me because my fingers are big and I'm having to stick them in between the two black keys. But don't worry, practice until you get that fingering down and it's smooth for you. Lastly, B flat. Again. So, now you've learned how to play every scale and the finger placement and patterns for all the scales. Here's the important thing though. You really need to take some time and make sure you have these down very good because that's going to come up. You want to make sure that while you're doing these scales, you realize that in the key of C, there are no sharps and flats. Or that when you're playing the D scale, there's going to be two sharps, which is F sharp and C sharp. Those are the type things you want to start memorizing and looking over as you do these scales and play through them. Make sure that you're able to play them fluently, clearly, and without hesitation, because that's going to play an important part as we begin to take these scales and add things to them in further lessons. So hey, until you get these down, I probably wouldn't move on to lesson 4. But when you're ready, I'll see you there. Hey guys, welcome to lesson 4. I hope that by now you have a really strong grasp on all the names of the keys, understanding half steps, whole steps, understanding the sharps and flats, and now you've learned all the notes in all the major scales and are able to play them with the correct fingering and have a good grasp on how many sharps are in different scales and know what notes are appropriate for each scale. That's going to come into play in this lesson because we're going to start teaching you how to chord. Chording is going to be imperative because it's built off of understanding the scale pattern. All right? So, now forgetting about the fingering pattern and the numbers that I gave you for that system, we're going to move on into learning that each degree of the scale, or the major scale, has a corresponding number or position that it plays. Okay? So if we start out on the C scale, all right, our C would be the first note, and we would call that 1. D would be the second degree of the scale, and it would be called a 2. E would be the third degree of that scale, and it's known as 3. F is 4. G is 5. A is 6, and B is 7. So each individual note of that scale, as it progresses up, progresses in a number value that moves upward too. That number value is going to be very important because it is going to help you, number one, form chords. Number two, it's going to tell you the position that that chord is in the scale pattern. And it's also going to help you learn, once you know all the chords that are corresponding to those numbers, you'll be able to use what's called the Nashville number system, which we'll be going over in a future lesson. So, I'd like to show you what I'm talking about when I'm saying each individual scale has a number system, and then we're going to get into forming major and minor chords in this lesson. I hope you're ready. Here we go. All right, guys, so here, let's look at the scale again and see, starting with our C scale, what I mean by adding the numbers. So C is our root note. Remember, it's our starting note. So it's 1. Moving up, 2 would be D. Moving up in the position of that scale is 3, which is E. It's the third position in the scale. Then moving back up to 4. Next would be 5. A is 6. B is 7. And C is 8, or 1. Now this is an octave. We talked about that in earlier lessons. An octave is a note that is 8 steps or 8 notes away in the scale. And it's always the same note, it's just an octave up. So 8 and 1 are the same thing. So we know the scale. Okay? Now why is that important? It's going to be important in understanding the positions of the numbers in each scale because each scale is going to help you create chords. So here's the deal. A major chord, and this is on the 9 chords to know sheet that I gave you, but the first chord in that sheet is a major chord. And the rule for that chord is that a major chord is made from the first, third, and fifth degrees of the scale played at the same time. So the first, third, and fifth degree of the scale played at the same time. So if we wanted a C major chord, out of the C scale, we're going to need to play the first, which is C. So you always play that first note with your thumb. The third, 2, 3, which is E. You play that second note with your forefinger. And the fifth, 4, 5. You play that with your middle finger. You always want to chord with these 3 fingers. So the first, third, and fifth degree of the C major scale makes a C major chord. Do you see that? So a C major is this, because it's got the first, the third, and the fifth degree of the scale. Now if you need to rewind and hear that again, feel free to do so. But we're going to go on and we're going to make major chords out of all the rest of the keys. D major. Remember, first, third, and fifth of the D scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our D chord is, that is a D major. Now you can also, if you can stretch, play that octave. Okay? Or you can just play it like that, however you want. I like playing it with octave. So that's D major. E major. Remember, first, third, fifth. Is your E major. First, third, fifth. Moving to F. Remember the degree. First, third, fifth. That is an F major. Here's a G major. First, third, fifth. There's a G major. A major. You have your first, third, fifth. There's an A major. B major. First, third, fifth. That is a B major. Let's go down to C sharp or D flat. First, third, fifth. C sharp or D flat. Moving on to D sharp or E flat. First, third, fifth. E flat. F sharp major. First, third, fifth. A flat major. First, third, fifth. A flat. B flat major. There you go. And that is your B flat major. Now, you can pause here and go on and practice playing all your major scales and figuring them out. Make sure you get your fingerings really well, because I'm about to move into making minor scale or minor chords. All right? So if you don't have majors down, go on, whether it's taking a day or so or however you want to do it, and practice playing all your majors. You should be able to play all your majors before you move on to learning minors. Here, we're going to learn minors. Now, the rule for the minor is you take a major chord and you lower the third degree by half a step, or you flat it by half a step. So let's look at C. Here's C major. Now, if I want to take or make C minor, I have to take the third degree and I have to flat it, which is going down, by half a step. See where half steps and going down and all this stuff comes into play here? You have to understand which way you're moving and how you're going to do that. So here's C major. To make C minor, I take the third and I lower it or flat it half a step. And that is C minor. Now, why don't you pause the video now and try to start making all the minors out of the majors that you learned. And then you can come back and make sure you did it right. I'll give you examples of each. Here's D minor. Again, D minor. Taking the third, flatting it, a half step. Here's E minor. Taking the third and flatting it. Here's F minor. I took the third of the major and I flatted it half a step. Here's G minor. Again, taking the third and flatting it. Here's A minor. Taking the third and flatting it. Here's B minor. Again, B major, flatting the third. Do you notice the sound that minors give? Let's go to our sharps and flats, starting with C sharp or D flat. Here's the minor. Here's E flat, minor. Moving to F sharp, minor. Just flatting that third. Here's A flat, minor. Just flatting that third. And lastly, we have B flat, minor. Take the third, you flat it. That's all your minors. Okay, so now I've shown you all your majors and your minor chords. These are going to be imperative for our next lesson. So if you don't quite have those down, I challenge you and encourage you, please go on and stop, pause it, write your time down, whatever you got to do, but keep practicing your majors and your minors. For you to move on, it's going to be imperative that you have these down very well and that you know them all like the back of your hand. All right? So if you need to stop, go and feel free to do so. If not, and you're ready to move on, I'll see you in lesson 5. Oh, hello. Welcome to lesson 5. Now, if you've already made it this far, then that means you have a firm grasp on all the stuff we've done in the previous lessons, which is things like whole step, half step, sharps, flats, knowing all your scales, being able to play them, and also knowing every major and minor chord that there is. So if that's where you're at, then you're at the right place, all right? And I'm excited for you because now I want to start taking your understanding of the scale to an even deeper level, into what I call scale chord progressions, which means we play up the scale, but we form chords through the numbers for each of the individual degrees in the scale. Okay, so what that means is that I'm going to teach you this number system. Remember we talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, each degree note has a corresponding scale that goes with it, or excuse me, corresponding chord that goes with it. So with each degree of that note, you're going to learn some basic rules. Now this is where I want you to take out the sheet that I gave you that has all of the chord progressions on it. And there are a couple rules there that I want you to pay close attention to. In every key, the 1, the 4, and the 5 are going to be a major chord. So like let's say we're in the key of C and you want to play the 1, all right, which is a chord of C major. And it's going to be major because it's the 1. Well, also what's going to be major in that chord structure is the 4. So what's the 4th degree of the C scale? F. So that chord is going to be a what? F major. Again, playing the 5, which is going to be a major. What's the 5th degree of the scale? G. So that chord is going to be a G major. You already know all these chords because you learned them in the last lesson. So your 1, your 4, and your 5 in the key of C are C major, F major, and G major. Now, the other rule you need to pay attention to is your 2 and your 6. In every key, unless otherwise noted, your 2 and your 6 will always be minor. Okay? So in the key of C, you have the 2nd degree of the scale, which is D, your 2. So that's going to be not a D major, but a D minor. And I'll show that to you in just a minute with the overhead view. Lastly, you have a 6, which is A. So if 6 is your A, what's that chord going to be? Well, 2 and 6 are minor. So it's going to be an A minor. So in the key of C, you have a 1 that's a C major, a 2 that's a D minor, a 4 that's an F major, a 5 that's a G major, a 6 that's an A minor. Well, you might be saying, well, Brandon, that leaves out 2 notes. You're right. What do you do with E and B? Well, they're going to be called transition chords. Okay? And your 3 and your 4, or your 3 and your 7, will always be played as 1 over 3 and 5 over 7. And you can see on that chart how that looks. Okay? You can also see above me how that looks. 1 over 3, 5 over 7. Okay? These are called transition chords. Now let's look at the keyboard and let me show you what this looks like. So, as we said, you're taking the C scale. We've put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each note of the scale has a corresponding number, which is a degree of the scale, okay, or a tone. And now we've put chords to those degrees. So 1 is C. Well, we know that 1's going to be major. So it's going to be a C major. So a 2 in the key of C is D, and we know that 2 is going to be minor. Now we have 3. Now that's a transition chord. So the chord is 1, played in your right hand, over 3 in your left hand. Okay? Then we move to 4, which we know is going to be major. Then we go to 5, G, which we know is going to be major. Then we're moving up, 6. Now 6 and 2 are always minor, unless otherwise noted. So 6 is going to be A minor. 7's another transition chord. So that chord is 5, which is the G major, played in your right hand, over 7, which is B in your left hand. All the way up back to 1 or 8. Okay? So, now, let me teach you this. In my left hand, I always octave. And the reality of this is, your hands are doing 2 different things, but they're making the chords, okay? So your right hand is going to do this. Okay? While your left hand goes and makes the chord, or basically walks up the scale. Okay? Now when I put these together, it's going to make all these chords. Okay? So again, remember, what you're really wanting to focus on is where these chords are in the progression of the scale. So if you're wanting to play this in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you'd go 1 major, 2 minor, 1 over 3. See how 1 over 3. 4, 5, 6, 5 in your right, over 7 to 1. Now again, playing that upward, we're going to go like this. Feel free at any time during this to pause and try to play this on your own. Okay? You really want to get familiar with this. We're going to start playing these through every chord and every key. And remember, the 1's always going to be major, the 4 and 5's always going to be major, the 2 and 6 will always be minor, and 3 and 7 are going to be transition chords through the rest of these chord progressions. Don't feel bad about having to pause and practice. In fact, if you want to take a week and do 3 or 4 at a time, feel free to do that. Just mark off in the video where you're at so you can come back to this point and continue learning. I'm going to give you examples now of each key, how you would play this, and I'm going to move C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then do flats and sharps like we've been doing in the rest of the video. So here we go. Here's C again. That's C. Here's D. Very easy. Here's E. Here's F. Here's G. Very easy. Okay, here's A. Here's B. Here's D flat. Here's E flat. Here's F sharp major. Here's A flat. And here's B flat. So now you have a grasp on chord progressions through scales, all right? I really implore you to make sure you know these like the back of your hand. If you need to take a week or even 2 weeks to keep practicing these, whatever your time frame will allow, then do that. Don't rush ahead, because I promise if you don't have a grasp of these, then you're not going to be able to use the knowledge that I'm going to give you in just a few minutes in lesson 6. So, take your time, get through them, play these very fluently and fluidly. Make sure that they're smooth. Make sure that you can play through them up and down and that you know how and where the chords go, okay? The second thing is, make sure that you really have a strong grasp on the technique of understanding the numbers. That 1, 4, and 5 are major, 2 and 6 are minor, and 3 and 7 are transition chords. That is in every key. Let me show you how you're going to use that. Let's say you're playing a song in the key of C, and your chord progression is a 6, which is an A minor, a 4, which is an F, a 1, which is a C, and a 7, which is a G over B. But then let's say that the leader wants to go up to D. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to hit a quick transition chord, and you're going to go B, G, D, A over C sharp, because you know that that chord progression in the key of D is those chords, because you have memorized what those chords are. You should not even have to look at a keyboard to understand that the 1 in E is an E, that the 7 in E is a B over D sharp, that the 6 in E is C sharp minor. Does that make sense? So until you get that, keep watching this lesson over, keep practicing, and make sure you have a strong grasp on that before you move on to lesson 6. If you already have that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome to lesson 6. I'm so glad you've made it this far. Guess what? Our journey's almost over. There's a few things left we got to go over. But up until this point, you've learned some pretty incredible stuff. You should right now be able to know all your scale patterns, know basic terms like flat, sharp, whole step, half step, and be able to play chord progressions in every key. What we're going to be learning in this lesson is going to build off that. Now, if you're not there, I implore you, go back to lessons 4 and 5 and make sure you have all that under your belt. The other thing you should be able to really comprehend is that each individual key follows the same rules of the number system. 1, 4, and 5 are always major, 2 and 6 are always minor, and 3 and 7 are always transition chords, unless otherwise noted. That needs to be in your head, and that needs to be in your understanding, okay? Because let's say you're in the key of C, and the chord progression that you're playing is a 6 minor, 4, 1 to a 7. All right, so in the key of C, those chords would be A minor, F, C, G over B. Or it would sound a little something like this. Okay? Now let's say the leader, or whoever you're going with, the band director, whatever, wants to take it up to D, and you don't have a chord chart for it in D. Well, that's the beauty of the number system. Because if you understand that the progression is 6, 4, 1, 7, you can take it into any key. So let's say he just wanted to throw out the key of F sharp. I hate F sharp, but guess what? That doesn't worry me because I can play it. Listen. It's that simple. And that's what you want to know the number system for, so that you can on the fly be able to transpose. So if that's not for sure a strong foundation for you, don't move on into this lesson, no matter how tempting it is. Go on and pause, go back to lesson 6, and really get that under your belt. Now, if you're ready to move on, we're going to go on through the rest of our chord sheets, the 9 chords to know, and I'm going to teach you progressively each of those chords, starting with the key of C, moving chromatically all the way up, and you're going to know by the end of this lesson how to play all 9 chords in every key. That's exciting. I hope you're ready to learn. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We've already taught you majors and minors. So what you really want to do now is you want to take these and you want to build on top of that. So if you're on a minor, it's very simple. What you want to do is you want to flat your 5th on top of the flatted 3rd of the minor to make a diminished chord. So a C diminished would be a 1, a 3 flat, and a 5 flat. Okay? And you flat those half a step. So here's your C diminished. Again, a diminished chord is a flatted 5th and a flatted 3rd. Why don't you go on and pause the video and play your diminished and practice your diminished chords all the way up from C to B. go chromatically and make sure that you're playing them correctly. So play the minor first, then flat the fifth, and make sure you have the diminished down. Once you have that, come back and we'll move to augmented. Now that you've got diminished in each key, let's go on and move to augmented. So augmented is basically a major chord with a sharped fifth, and you sharp that fifth a half step. So just raise the fifth half a step. So a major C would be this, but a C augmented would be a raised fifth. Now, that may sound familiar to you because a lot of music uses augments. Let me give you one popular example. See if you can tell what this is. Did you catch it? Exactly. Mission Impossible. Do-do-do, do-do-do. All right, they're using the augment to create that cool feel in the music. So why don't you now pause and go through and play the rest of your augments. I'll give you examples of the rest of the augmented. Here's D augmented. Here's E augmented. Here's F augment. Here's G augment. Here's A augment. Here's B augment. Moving to flats and sharps. Here's D flat augment. Here's E flat augment. Here's F sharp augment. A flat augment. B flat augment. There's all your augmented. Make sure that you stop and practice these and make sure that you know them. Now that you've got your augmented, let's move to second chords, which are very important. A second chord, or a two chord, is made by raising the one a whole step. I like to play it in this voicing because it creates an easy way for me to roll chords, which I'll show you in just a moment. But with C, here's a regular C major, and now here's a C2. Very pretty chord. I also like twos because I'm able to roll my chords with twos. Let me show you what I mean. When I roll chords up the keyboard, I start on a 2 and I roll all the way up. And then I pull my finger to that D and I roll back up. So I'm playing the full octave chord, but I start on the 2. Let me show that again. I'm playing the full octave chord, but I start with the 2 and I roll it. One more time. Now that's something you can practice on your own if you'd like. It will definitely help increase your playing. But here's what you really need to get, is making a second chord for each individual note. So go through all your chords, your major chords, and make them seconds, okay? I will show you and give you examples of what each one looks like. Here's D2. Here's E2. Here's F2. Here's G2. Here's A2. Here's B2. Here's D flat 2. Here's E flat 2. Here's F sharp 2. Here's A flat 2. And finally, here's B flat 2. See how easy rolling that 2 is? You always just want to do it when you try. Now, moving on to suspended. These are great chords to use because they add a little flair and taste to your playing ability. A suspended chord is very simple. It's built off the major, and it's built by raising the third a half step up. All right, so all you do is sharp that third note a half step. So here's a C major, and with me sharpen the half step up half a step, I get a C suspended. Now, a lot of times suspended chords will be used and they will resolve back to the 1. So it'll sound something like this. Okay? But most of the time, they'll stay there. So it'd be a good place to stop here, take a pause, and go through each note and play your suspended chords. I'll give you examples of all the suspended so you can make sure you're playing it right. Here's D suspended. Here's E suspended. Here's F suspended. Here's G suspended. Here's A suspended. Here's B suspended. Moving to the sharps and flats. Here's D flat or C sharp suspended. Here's D sharp or E flat suspended. Here's F sharp or G flat suspended. Here's A flat or G sharp suspended. And finally, here's B flat or A sharp suspended. Now let's move on to sevenths. Sevenths are very simple, and the reason I like to play chords using the octave is because it gives me room to use my pinky and my ring finger to do little things, such as adding sevenths and little tiny trills and things like that here and there. I'll show you what I mean. Here's a C, regular C major with the octave. A seventh is the seventh note. Remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You add the seventh, okay? But a seventh is flatted, okay? So it gives it a minor feel. So you have a C, and a C seventh is going to be a whole step from the 8. So it's going to be a 7 whole step. So here's a C, and then take that finger down and add that B flat. That's a C7, okay? So if it's just a regular 7, it's a whole step down from the 8. Does everybody understand? So that's a C7. Let's go through and practice the rest of these. D7. Adding that C, instead of going the octave, add that C. E7. Now another way to add the 7 is dropping your thumb, okay? So you can play a 7th like this, or you can play a 7th like this. That's still adding the 7th. I usually like to play it like this Sometimes I'll play it like that. Just depends. So E7 would be that, or it would be that, because you're still adding the 1 in. Okay? So that's an E7. F7. You can play it like that, or you can drop it down with your thumb like this. But make sure you're playing the F in the octave. If you can't reach like that, that's not going to be the way you want to play it, and you want to play it like that. G7. I also like to play the G7 like that. Sometimes I just like to drop the thumb. So you can drop the thumb or you can drop the pinky. A7. Same thing. They're both sevenths. B7. Or however you want to do it. Let's go to our sharps and flats. D flat 7. Or, but I like this one better for D flat. E flat 7. Or, that's a great chord. I really love that one right there. So you can play it like that, or you can add it at the top. F sharp 7. You can play it like that, or you can add it at the top. However you want to do it. A flat 7. You play it like this, and you can drop it. And finally, B flat 7. You can add it at the top, or you can drop it down. However feels comfortable to you. That's the thing about keys playing. Do what feels comfortable to you. Obviously, with all these chords, you would want to add in that bass. And pretty much on every chord I've taught you, whether it's majors, augmented, diminished, however, that's what you'd want to add in. So feel free to take a pause and go over your sevenths before we move on to major sevenths. Now, major sevenths are a lot like sevenths, except they're only flatted a half step, and they fit into the scale. So if I'm in the key of C, and I want to play a C major 7, then I'm not going to play a B flat because B flat's not in the scale. I'm going to play the 7 of the scale. And I always add that at the top. Okay? So a 7, major 7, is flatting the 8 a half step. Not a whole step like the 7. Major 7 adds the one that's in the scale. Real pretty chord right there. So why don't we go through and I'll show you examples of all major 7 chords. Starting with D. E7. F7. G7. A7. B7. Go into flats and sharps. D flat 7. E flat 7. F sharp 7. A flat 7. And B flat 7. Remember, the major 7 always, and all those were major 7s. I know I said 7, but all those were major 7s. Okay? And that's going to be notated with an M-A-G or M-A-J beside the 7. And I'll show you. Look at this. This is what a C major 7 would look like right here. See how it's M-A-J with a 7 at the top. That is how you want to play the major 7s. Make sure you can play all those before moving on to ninths, because ninth is going to add 2 of the ones that we just played to create an even prettier chord. Ninths are created by adding a major 7 and a second together. So adding the 2 plus a major 7 gives you a 9. So here's what a regular C would sound like. Here's what a C2 would sound like. Here's what a C7 would sound like, or major 7. And now here's what a C ninth would sound like. So I've already got the major 7, I'm just going to add the 2. Isn't that a pretty chord right there? And there's your C ninth. Now why don't you pause and go through all the rest of these and make ninths using the major 7th of the chord and the second added together. Once you're done, I'll give you examples of how they should sound to make sure you're doing it right. Here's D7 or D9. Here's E9. Here's F9. Here's G9. Here's A9. Here's B9. Now your flats and sharps. Here's D flat 9. Here's E flat 9. Here's F sharp 9. Here's A flat 9. And finally, here's B flat 9. So now you've learned all 9 chords in every key that you could possibly learn them in. And the awesome thing is you have a great opportunity to take those and apply them. I'm going to show you in just a brief extended lesson, lesson 7, how you can take those and play around with them. It ain't going to be a long lesson because it gets into more advanced things that will have to come in another series of videos. But I hope that you've enjoyed these lessons, that you'll take a look at the brief lesson 7, and then I'll come back and we'll close it out. Hey guys, welcome to the brief, extended final lesson of the entire series. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I want you to see some of this so you can understand how you can take what I've already taught you in the last few weeks and begin to apply it into your playing. Take a look at this. Now that you've went through all the lessons here at Basic Piano Techniques, I want to give you some ideas of how to incorporate these in your playing. Now you've already learned major, minor, suspended, augmented, diminished, different chords like that. And you might be saying, well, what do I need to do with those? Well, I want to give you some ideas of how to work with those. Now let's say you're reading a chord chart and your chords are C, F, G, A minor, F, C. So it would sound something like this. Okay, so you've played the C, F, A minor, G, C. Now what's some ways you could spice that up? How about playing 2s instead of just major chords? So you would get a sound more like this. That's just rolling a 2 and using a little bit of rhythm. Now when I play pretty things or when I'm playing around, like let's take the basic scale progression down and we're going to play a 1, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And then we're going to go back to 1. So it would normally sound something like this. Very easy stuff. But what can you do to make that sound prettier? Well, maybe adding a little more rhythmic flair to it, and then incorporating some of these chords that I've taught you, such as seconds, sevenths, or major sevenths, and ninths. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here I would take C and I would roll it into a 2. Then I'd walk it down. There's an A minor 7 right there. Then a G suspended. Roll into that 3, back to the G major, into an F2. Then I'd walk it down, transition chord, C over E. Now D minor 7, walk it up, F2, G suspended, into C, roll into 2, and then I'd keep progressing like that. So that's a way that you can take all of these different techniques that I've taught you over the last few weeks and really apply them into making your playing a lot more pretty. Then you'll get into things more advanced as you start messing around and playing, and you'll be able to learn things like that's going to come in another series of lessons, because that's not basic piano techniques. That's going to be more advanced. Well, that does it for this series of basic piano techniques. I hope that you've learned something great. I hope you've enjoyed your time. Thank you so much for choosing this video. Thank you for having me in your home. And thank you for allowing me to teach you the wonderful gift of music. I pray that it will bless you in your future, and that it will help you become an even greater musician than you already are. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, make sure to visit me on Facebook, or you can email me at pianotechniques@gmail.com. Make sure to be watching for some of the more advanced technique series that I'm going to be putting out in the near future. God bless, and I hope to see you soon.